Warning, grooming and CSA discussed. Tate's fingers twitched at his sides, fists clenching then unclenching, his chest heaving with shallow, fast breaths. The calm, unflinching neutrality in Noah's face, his refusal to react, to falter, to even blink in fear or anger, was driving Tate toward the edge. It wasn't just rage, it was a kind of helpless obsession he'd never felt before. "You're impossible," Tate muttered, almost to himself, leaning closer. I can't do this, I can't control you and it's killing me." Noah tilted his chin slightly, voice soft, quiet. "Then let it, I don't care." Tate's breath hitched. He pressed in, leaning more, but Noah didn't budge, didn't respond, didn't react. The impossibility of Noah's calm was worse than any fight, any scream, any rejection. It left Tate raw, frustrated, unmoored, desperate, and completely powerless. Noah's quiet, measured presence made the air between them thick with tension. Tate's rage simmered, jealousy burned, and yet there was nothing he could do, no words, shoves, or manipulation that would elicit a reaction. Noah's silence was absolute, neutral, unreachable. Tate finally stepped back slightly, chest heaving, eyes wild. You're insane," he muttered, voice breaking with frustration, confusion, and obsession. "You're impossible and God, I don't know what to do with you." Noah remained calm, expressionless, hands in pockets, head slightly tilted, neutral, untouchable. For a long, charged moment, the hallway seemed suspended in tension. Tate pressed his forehead to the wall, hands braced on either side of Noah, trying to hold the storm at bay. And Noah did nothing but exist, calm, unreactive, untouchable. "You think you can just ignore me?" Tate hissed, his chest pressing close to Noah's, his weight leaning forward. "You think I'll just let this, whatever this is, slide?" Noah stayed still, calm, expression neutral, eyes forward. He didn't flinch, he didn't react. That impossibility made Tate's chest tighten even more. Tate's hands shot down, guiding Noah to the hallway floor. "Stay," Tate demanded, straddling him, knees on either side, leaning down, his arms braced on the floor near Noah's shoulders. His gaze burned, searching for any crack, any reaction. Noah's calm was maddening, neutral, untouchable, unflinching. "I'm not reacting," he said softly, voice controlled. "Whatever you feel, it's yours, I'm not making you do anything." Tate's jaw clenched, the weight of his body pressing down, the proximity, the heat, and the jealousy all collided into a sharp, almost unbearable mix of hurt and obsession. "You don't get it," he growled. "You have no idea what you do to me." Noah tilted his head fractionally, still calm, still quiet. "I know exactly what I do to you, and I do it intentionally, to make you see yourself. To make you understand I don't react anymore to your selfish and immature behavior, Tate." Tate's chest rose and fell rapidly. His hands flexed on the floor, gripping the polished wood, struggling for control, for balance, for any way to make Noah respond. I can't handle this calm," he muttered, voice almost breaking. I can't read you and it's killing me." Noah's lips moved in the faintest ghost of a smile, but otherwise he remained neutral, immovable. That smile, small, controlled, teasing, cut sharper than any yell or any shove Noah ever gave Tate. Tate pressed closer, leaning down, forehead nearly brushing Noah's. "You're impossible," he whispered. I can't deal with you." Tate's chest pressed close, his weight straddling Noah on the hallway floor. The heat of his body, the proximity, the intensity, it all screamed possession, desperation, and a craving Noah had once welcomed. Tate's hand reached up, cupping the side of Noah's face gently, and he leaned in, aiming for the familiar soft place he had always kissed Noah's temple. "I just want," Tate whispered, voice low, almost pleading. Noah flinched hard. He jerked his head away, pushing against Tate's chest with all the force he could muster, eyes blazing with something he rarely allowed himself to feel, pure, unfiltered loathing. "Don't you dare," he spat, voice sharp, trembling with fury. I loathe you right now, this everything you've done, just stop." Tate froze, confusion flickering across his features. His lips hovered inches from Noah's skin, but Noah's glare and the push of his hands made it impossible. The intensity of Noah's loathing, rejection, and fury hit Tate harder than any argument or any calm neutrality he had ever faced. "I don't want your hands on me," Noah continued, trembling with rage. "I don't want your closeness, I don't want your fake concern. I loathe that you think you can just lean in, touch me, and it fixes anything." Tate's chest heaved, a low growl escaping his throat, the jealousy and obsession twisting tighter with every word. He had wanted this closeness, this intimacy, for years, and now it was repelled, shattered by the raw fury in Noah's eyes. Noah shoved him gently but firmly, enough to create space, enough to put distance between them. "I'm not your buddy right now," he hissed. "I don't want you." Tate's hands hovered tense, unsure. The temple kiss remained unclaimed. For the first time, Tate didn't know what to do, and Noah's loathing was a tangible wall he couldn't breach. Noah's chest rose and fell rapidly, burning with anger, shame, and heartbreak all at once. Tate stared down at him, the weight of obsession and jealousy mingling with a rare and uncharacteristic helplessness. And in that hallway, neither moved, neither spoke, only the tension of past closeness and current fury filling the space between them. Tate yanked himself off the uncomfortable dark hallway floor. Jay encouraged Tate to reclaim what he called his bodily autonomy by sleeping with as many girls as possible. He wanted Tate to construct a convincing Tate Blue facade, the image of a wealthy, confident, heterosexual heir who could move through their world without anyone questioning him. Whenever the facade became exhausting, Jay told Tate to rely on him and Noah for comfort. The contradiction was devastating. Tate was being encouraged to use women to prove an identity he didn't truly feel connected to, while turning to the two people he trusted most whenever that performance became unbearable. But from Noah's perspective, all he could see was Tate repeatedly choosing girls and refusing to openly define what existed between them. Over time, Noah began believing the conclusion Jay wanted him to reach. Tate had never loved him. When Noah turned 18, Jay encouraged him to leave Tate's house. He told Noah that he needed to make his own friends, move forward, and emotionally invest somewhere else. Jay encouraged him to build relationships at Brown and become especially close to Mark. On the surface, Jay's advice sounded compassionate. Noah was hurting, and Jay appeared to be giving him permission to heal. But Jay knew exactly what those new attachments would accomplish. The more Noah emotionally relied on people other than Tate, the greater the wall between them became. Noah began turning to his Brown friends and Mark whenever he needed reassurance or comfort. Mark became particularly important because Tate remained emotionally avoidant and refused to name their relationship. Tate's silence was not evidence that he didn't care. He was terrified of what acknowledging the relationship could mean because of Jay and Terrence. Noah didn't know that. He only knew that Tate wouldn't give their relationship a name. Jay therefore encouraged Noah to become closer to Mark, presenting it as a healthy way to cope and move forward. But Jay knew something else. Mark would make Tate jealous in the same way Noah made Jay jealous. As Noah's bond with Mark deepened, Tate began interpreting the situation through his own fears. Instead of understanding that Noah was seeking comfort because Tate was emotionally unavailable, Tate saw another man becoming increasingly important to Noah. Tate began believing that men were stealing Noah's heart away from him. And Noah, meanwhile, believed Tate had never wanted his heart in the first place. Jay had created a perfect cycle. He encouraged Tate to hide behind the Tate Blue facade. He encouraged Noah to emotionally move away from Tate. He encouraged Noah to rely on Mark for the comfort Tate couldn't provide. Then he watched as Tate became jealous of the very distance Jay had helped create. Neither man understood the full picture. Tate thought Noah was falling for other men. Noah thought Tate had never loved him. And Jay knew the truth. He had deliberately encouraged both interpretations because the more emotionally disconnected Tate and Noah became, the easier it was to keep control over what each man believed about the other. Much of Noah's emotional instability in the present was rooted in 20 years of believing a story Jay had carefully constructed for him. Noah had spent years struggling with depression, low self-confidence, and the conviction that Tate had never truly loved him. He believed that Tate had used him, breadcrumbed him, and kept him emotionally attached without ever intending to give him a real relationship. Medications such as Prozac helped Noah manage the symptoms he struggled with, but it could not erase the beliefs that had been reinforced throughout his life. Jay had spent years convincing Noah that Tate was indifferent towards him. Every time Tate refused to define their relationship, Jay gave Noah an explanation that supported that conclusion. Every time Tate fucked a woman, Jay used it as evidence. every period of emotional distance became proof that Noah had imagined the connection between them. Eventually, Noah internalized those messages so deeply that even when Tate finally expressed genuine love, Noah couldn't trust it. He assumed Tate's feelings were temporary. To Noah, Tate's love in the present could only be another fixation, something intense that would eventually disappear once Tate became bored, frightened, or interested in someone else. Jay had created that expectation long before Tate had the opportunity to prove otherwise. But Jay had manipulated Tate as well. He convinced Tate that Noah's emotional loyalty was constantly being redirected toward other men. Whenever Noah became close to someone else, Jay framed it as evidence that Noah's heart was moving away from Tate. Mark became especially significant in that narrative. Jay encouraged Noah to rely on Mark for emotional comfort while simultaneously allowing Tate to believe that Mark was taking Noah's affection, loyalty, and attention away from him. Riley could be used in much the same way. Jay wanted Tate to see Noah's relationships with other men not as evidence of Noah's loneliness or his need for emotional support, but as proof that Noah was choosing other people over him. Even Noah's physical relationships became ammunition in Jay's manipulation. Jay encouraged Tate to interpret Noah's willingness to become physically close with other men as another indication that Noah's loyalty and affection belonged elsewhere. The result was devastating. Noah believed Tate didn't love him. Tate believed Noah didn't remain loyal to him. Noah saw Tate's love as temporary. Tate saw Noah's connections with other men as evidence that his heart had already moved on. Both conclusions were wrong. But Jay had spent decades making those wrong conclusions feel like undeniable truth. The tragedy wasn't simply that Jay kept Tate and Noah apart. It was that he taught each man to distrust the evidence that they actually loved one another. Jay was brilliant in the most destructive way imaginable. He didn't need to keep Tate and Noah physically separated forever. He only needed to make them too traumatized, exhausted, resentful, and emotionally defeated to sit down and ask each other the questions that could have destroyed his entire scheme. Jay needed Noah and Tate to remain trapped inside their assumptions. Noah could never learn the truth about Tate's bisexuality, his childhood abuse, or the reasons Tate had spent years hiding behind emotional distance. Tate could never fully understand Noah's desperate need for emotional connection, why Noah sometimes sought comfort from other people, or why he would leave Tate's bed early or refuse to choose Tate even after their intimacy. Every unanswered question became another wall. Every unexplained action became another wound. And Jay was behind all of it. He controlled which truths reached Noah and which reached Tate. He manufactured misunderstandings, encouraged false assumptions, concealed confessions, distorted motivations, and deliberately withheld information that might have allowed either man to understand the other. When Noah interpreted Tate's distance as indifference, Jay let him believe it. When Tate interpreted Noah's relationships with other men as rejection, Jay reinforced it. When Noah wondered why Tate wouldn't openly acknowledge what existed between them, Jay supplied an explanation. When Tate wondered why Noah kept looking elsewhere for emotional comfort, Jay supplied another. Jay understood that the truth would bring them together. So he made sure neither man ever possessed enough of it to see the whole picture. The cruelest part was that Tate and Noah eventually became resentful of each other for wounds neither had actually caused. Noah resented Tate for supposedly using him for 20 years. Tate resented Noah for supposedly giving his heart and loyalty to other men. Both believed the other had repeatedly chosen someone else. Neither understood that Jay had been standing between them, quietly shaping what each believed about the other. Jay didn't merely lie to them. He constructed an entire reality in which their own observations appeared to confirm his lies. By the time the truth began emerging, 20 years of accumulated hurt had made the two men exhausted and defensive. They had spent so long protecting themselves from one another that even the possibility of reconciliation felt dangerous. That was Jay's greatest achievement. He hadn't simply separated Tate and Noah. He had taught them to become witnesses against each other. Every lie, every deception, every carefully hidden truth, every manipulated misunderstanding had served the same purpose: keep them from having one honest conversation in which everything finally came into the light. Jay wasn't merely a man standing between two people who loved each other. He had made himself the author of the story they believed about one another. And in Tate and Noah's eyes, there was no more fitting description of him than evil incarnate. Jay's cruelty toward Tate reached another level when Tate was 25. During the assault, Jay deliberately connected the trauma to Noah by bringing Noah's photograph into the experience. Jay wanted the memory of Noah to become entangled with terror, violation, and helplessness. His intention was calculated. Jay wanted Tate to associate intimacy with men he genuinely loved with the trauma he had inflicted. If he could make Tate's strongest feelings for Noah coexist with the worst moment of his life, Jay believed Tate would never again be able to experience love and intimacy with another man without being haunted by him. But Jay's manipulation of Noah was even more calculated. He spent years conditioning Noah to distrust his own interpretation of Tate's feelings. Whenever Noah received affection from Tate, Jay provided an explanation that undermined it. Whenever Tate showed vulnerability, Jay reframed it as temporary. Whenever Noah hoped that Tate genuinely loved him, Jay reminded him of every contradiction, every woman Tate had been involved with, every period of distance, and every unanswered question. Jay wanted Noah to develop an internal rule. No matter what Tate says, don't believe him. Even if Tate eventually confessed his love, Noah was supposed to doubt it. Even if Tate explained his past, Noah was supposed to suspect that there was another hidden motive. Even if Tate became emotionally vulnerable, Noah was supposed to believe the feelings would eventually disappear. And even if Tate and Noah finally became intimate, Jay wanted Noah to interpret the experience as another temporary fixation by sexual curiosity, rather than evidence of enduring love. Most importantly, Jay wanted Noah to believe that choosing Tate would inevitably lead to disappointment. That was the psychological trap Jay spent years constructing. He didn't need Noah to forget Tate. He needed Noah to love Tate and still believe that Tate's love could never be trusted. That distinction was what made Jay's manipulation so devastating. He wanted Noah's feelings to survive while his trust in those feelings and in Tate was destroyed. Jay's ultimate goal was therefore not simply to keep Tate and Noah apart. He wanted to make reunion itself ineffective. Even if the two men finally talked. Even if they confessed everything. Even if they discovered that they had loved each other all along. Jay wanted the damage he had inflicted to remain between them, whispering that none of it could possibly be real. He wanted Noah to stand in front of the man he loved and still wonder whether Tate truly loved him. And he wanted Tate to believe that no matter what he did, Jay had already permanently changed the way Noah saw his buddy. Jay wasn't trying merely to prevent their reunion. He was trying to make them incapable of trusting it. Tate made one mistake he could never have understood the ripple effect of. Noah might have forgiven Tate for choosing Emily. He might even have forgiven Tate for all the women Tate had needed in his bed over the years, including the women who had been temporary lovers. But there was one thing Noah would never forgive. Tate had proven Jay right. For years, Jay had warned Noah that Tate would eventually abandon him. He told Noah that Tate would choose a wife, build a conventional heterosexual life, and eventually leave Noah behind as though their years together had never mattered. Noah had spent years fighting against that belief. He didn't want to believe Jay. He wanted to believe Tate. Then, in 1994, Tate disappeared from Noah's life and married Chloe. Noah didn't know the circumstances. He didn't know that Terrence had forced Tate into the marriage. He didn't know what Tate had sacrificed or what had happened behind closed doors. And eventually, Noah stopped caring about the explanation. It didn't matter whether Tate had married Chloe because Terrence forced him, because Tate felt trapped, or because there were circumstances Noah didn't understand. Tate had left. That was enough. To Noah, the event wasn't simply Tate marrying another person. It was the fulfillment of the exact prophecy Jay had repeated for years. Jay had been right. Tate really had abandoned him. Tate really had chosen a wife. Tate really had entered the heterosexual life Jay had predicted. And if Jay had been right about something this enormous, Noah couldn't stop himself from wondering whether Jay had been right about everything else. Maybe Tate never loved him. Maybe Tate had only been using him. Maybe their closeness had always meant more to Noah than it had to Tate. Maybe every moment Noah had treasured had been something Tate could eventually walk away from. That was the devastating ripple effect of Tate's decision. Noah wasn't simply angry that Tate married Chloe. He was devastated because Tate's marriage appeared to confirm 20 years of lies Tate had told Noah while it was really Jay who had lied. Tate had unknowingly handed Jay the one piece of evidence Noah needed to believe the entire story. And from that moment forward, Noah didn't need Jay to convince him anymore. Noah had convinced himself. Tate's cruel behavior toward Noah while he was married to Chloe became the final and most painful piece of evidence in the story Noah had been taught to believe about him. For years, Noah had tried to convince himself that Jay was wrong. He had spent his entire life questioning Tate's silences, his distance, his relationships with women, and his refusal to put a name to what existed between them. Whenever Jay suggested that Tate didn't truly care about him, Noah tried to find another explanation. Maybe Tate was frightened. Maybe he was protecting Noah. Maybe there were things about Tate's past that Noah didn't understand. Maybe beneath all the secrecy and confusion, Tate loved him just as deeply as Noah loved Tate. But then Tate married Chloe. And everything Noah had feared suddenly seemed undeniable. What hurt Noah most wasn't simply the marriage itself. It was the way Tate behaved afterward. Around Chloe's brothers, Tate could barely acknowledge Noah properly. At times, he even seemed to forget Noah's name, treating him like someone whose existence had to be minimized or erased whenever members of Chloe's family were nearby. To Noah, that behavior was devastating. This was the same Tate who had spent 22 years sharing a house with him, sleeping beside him, depending upon him, and allowing Noah to believe that their unusual closeness meant something. Yet now, in front of other people, Tate could behave as though Noah were barely significant enough to remember. Noah didn't know that Tate was trapped inside a marriage Terrence had forced upon him. He didn't know how frightened Tate was of the consequences of resisting his father. He didn't know that Tate's emotional avoidance had been shaped by years of abuse, secrecy, and manipulation. Noah only saw what was directly in front of him. And what he saw looked exactly like Jay's prediction. Jay had warned him for years that Tate would eventually choose a wife. Jay had told Noah that Tate would build a heterosexual life, leave Noah behind, and eventually behave as though their relationship had never mattered. Now Tate had married Chloe. Worse, Tate was acting as though Noah barely existed. Jay had been right. That realization shattered something inside Noah. Noah felt humiliated, not simply because Tate had married someone else, but because he suddenly wondered whether he had been a fool for 22 years. Had he spent all those years assigning meaning to moments Tate never valued? Had he mistaken Tate's dependence on him for love? Had he interpreted physical closeness, shared living arrangements, and years of sleeping in the same bed as evidence of an emotional bond that existed only in his imagination? The questions became unbearable. Noah began looking backward at their entire history and seeing it through a completely different lens. Every time Tate had refused to explain himself became evidence. Every woman became evidence, every silence became evidence. Every time Tate had pulled away became evidence. And Tate's marriage to Chloe became the final piece that seemed to make everything fit. Noah felt as though Tate had made a fool of him. What made the betrayal worse was that Noah had trusted Tate despite everything Jay had told him. He had continued believing that somewhere beneath Tate's fear and secrecy was a person who genuinely cared about him. Now Noah wondered whether Tate had ever cared at all. Even after Tate eventually realized the depth of his feelings for Noah, the realization came too late. Tate finally understood what Noah meant to him at the very moment Noah had stopped believing that Tate's feelings could be trusted. Noah could no longer separate Tate's present feelings from the 22 years of pain that preceded them. And that changed the meaning of physical closeness between them. After their first night together as lovers, Noah's willingness to remain physically close to Tate was no longer an expression of emotional trust. Noah could be near Tate without feeling emotionally connected to him. He could allow closeness without allowing vulnerability. He could remain beside Tate while keeping his heart protected behind a wall Tate could not cross. There was no longer the unquestioning trust Noah had once given him. No longer the assumption that Tate's presence meant safety. No longer the belief that physical closeness automatically represented love. From Noah's perspective, whatever physical proximity remained between them existed separately from his emotional relationship with Tate. Noah no longer wanted to confuse the two. He could be physically close to Tate and still distrust him. He could care about Tate and still resent him. He could want Tate near him and simultaneously believe that Tate had never truly chosen him. Most painfully, Noah could still have feelings for Tate while refusing to give Tate the emotional access he once had. That was what Jay's manipulation had ultimately accomplished. Jay had spent years teaching Noah to interpret Tate's behavior as proof of indifference. Then Tate unknowingly behaved in ways that appeared to confirm the story. Tate's marriage to Chloe wasn't enough by itself. His treatment of Noah afterward was what made the wound permanent. By the time Tate understood that Noah had never been merely a childhood buddy, never merely someone convenient to have around, and never merely a person he could return to whenever he needed comfort, Noah had already reached a devastating conclusion. If Tate could erase him so easily in front of Chloe's brothers after 22 years of sharing a life, then Noah couldn't trust any memory of what they had been. That was the true cost of Tate's mistake. Noah didn't simply believe Tate had abandoned him in 1994. He believed Tate had retroactively invalidated their entire history. The 22 years they had shared a home. The years they had slept beside each other. The private conversations. The companionship. The moments Noah had interpreted as tenderness. Everything became suspect. And once Noah began doubting the past, Tate's present love couldn't save him. Tate could finally say that he loved Noah. He could finally understand what Noah had meant to him. He could finally regret every time he had made Noah feel unwanted. But Noah had already learned the lesson Jay had spent decades teaching him. Don't believe Tate's love. So even when Tate finally offered Noah the truth, Noah couldn't simply accept it. He had been hurt too many times. He had been confused for too long. And most devastatingly, Tate had unknowingly given Jay's lies the appearance of truth. Noah didn't have to believe Jay anymore. Tate had seemed to prove him right. Noah eventually began matching the energy Tate had given him for 22 years. If Tate could remain emotionally distant, Noah could become emotionally distant too. If Tate refused to explain himself, Noah would stop explaining himself. If Tate refused to give their relationship a name, Noah would refuse to give it one as well. And if Tate could spend years making Noah wonder where he stood, Noah would no longer feel obligated to reassure Tate. For the first time, Tate was experiencing the relationship from Noah's side. Noah began choosing other men, not necessarily because they meant more to him than Tate, but because he had learned that Tate could not demand emotional loyalty that Tate himself had never clearly offered. Noah had spent years wondering whether Tate loved him, whether he mattered, and whether their connection was real. Now Noah stopped volunteering answers to questions Tate had never been willing to ask openly. The silence became deliberate. Tate had once used silence as protection. Noah now used it as self-protection. For 22 years, Tate had kept Noah guessing without explaining why he was distant, why he avoided labels, why he sometimes seemed affectionate and then abruptly withdrew, or why he could share a life with Noah while refusing to acknowledge what that life meant. Noah had spent years absorbing the pain of those contradictions. Now he gave Tate the same uncertainty. Tate could see Noah becoming close to other men and wonder what they meant. Tate could watch Noah with someone else and wonder whether Noah loved him. Tate could feel Noah pulling away and wonder whether he had finally lost him. And when Tate wanted reassurance, Noah didn't provide it. Not because Noah had forgotten how much he cared about Tate, but because he no longer believed it was his responsibility to make Tate feel secure after spending so many years feeling insecure himself. Noah was giving Tate back the life Tate had unknowingly created. The cruel silence. The unanswered questions. The emotional distance. The absence of labels. The uncertainty about where the other person stood. Tate had once believed that refusing to explain himself protected Noah. Now Noah's silence was protecting him from being hurt again. The difference was that Tate had been hiding because he was afraid. Noah was withholding because he was wounded. And Tate finally began to understand how painful it was to love someone who would not tell you what you meant to them. Tate genuinely believed Noah understood what he was trying to communicate after they finally became lovers. To Tate, his affection, his loyalty, his willingness to remain close to Noah, and everything he had struggled to express without words were obvious. To Noah they meant almost nothing. Noah no longer saw Tate as the man who had finally confessed what he felt. He saw him as the man who had spent 22 years proving Jay's warnings correct. Tate's love could not erase the past. His affection could not erase 22 years of silence, ambiguity, and emotional breadcrumbing. His loyalty could not erase the years Noah had spent wondering whether he mattered. And his history with Noah could not erase the 2 additional years of silence while Tate was married to Chloe. By then, Noah felt humiliated by how much of himself he had once invested in Tate. He had spent years believing that their shared home, their closeness, their companionship, and everything that existed between them meant they were building toward something. Now Noah looked back and wondered whether he had simply been accepting whatever fragments of affection Tate was willing to give him. So when Tate finally loved him openly, Noah couldn't receive it the way Tate expected. Tate thought his actions said, "I love you." Noah heard, "I'm here for now until something better catches my eye." Tate thought their renewed closeness meant they had finally found one another. Noah thought it was temporary. Tate believed their history gave their relationship meaning. Noah believed the history was precisely what made him incapable of trusting it. In Noah's mind, their relationship had become transactional and temporary, something Tate threw away the moment Pussy entered the room or heterosexual expectations became too strong to ignore or suppress. Tate's platonic or romantic affection was something that existed because it was convenient in the moment rather than because Tate had ever truly chosen him. That was why Tate's love no longer impressed him. What did it matter that Tate Blue loved Noah Lunas now? Where had that love been when Noah needed it for 22 years? Where had it been when Tate refused to explain himself? Where had it been when Noah spent years wondering whether he mattered? Where had it been when Tate married Chloe and allowed 2 more years of silence to pass? Noah wasn't asking whether Tate loved him anymore. He was asking whether Tate's love had ever been worth trusting. And after 22 years of being given reasons to doubt it, Noah's answer was painfully simple. Who cared that Tate Blue loved Noah Lunas? Noah had already learned how little love meant when it wasn't accompanied by trust, honesty, recognition, and the courage to choose someone openly. Tate could love him now. Noah simply didn't believe that love changed anything. Noah unpleasantly endured Tate's newfound romantic affection towards him because, from Noah's perspective, it felt selfishly overdue rather than meaningful. The timing made everything about Tate's sudden transformation impossible for Noah to accept at face value. Where had this affection been before Brown? Where had it been during university? Where had it been while they were living their lives at the Rambler before Chloe? Where had it been after Tate's engagement with Chloe was announced? Where was Tate's feelings when Noah didn't hear from Tate for a full year before the Blue Air tackled Noah in the hallway? Tate had recently annulled his marriage to Chloe, and Noah had no idea why. The reasons remained undisclosed, leaving Noah to fill in the blanks himself. To him, Tate must have been lost, hurt, lonely, and desperate. Perhaps the collapse of his marriage had left Tate searching for something familiar to hold onto, and Noah happened to be the person who was still within reach. Maybe that was why Tate's attention had suddenly landed on him. Noah couldn't convince himself that Tate's feelings were genuine simply because Tate was suddenly acting differently. After everything that had happened between them, there were too many other explanations. Maybe Tate was confused. Maybe he was grieving the life he had expected to have. Maybe he was lonely and looking for comfort from someone who had known him for most of his life. Or maybe Tate had simply forgotten that Noah was his ex-buddy, the person he had spent years keeping at an emotional distance. To Noah, Tate's sudden interest felt less like the discovery of some profound love and more like a man reaching backward because he didn't know where else to turn. And Noah refused to mistake desperation for love. Tate might genuinely believe he wanted Noah. But Noah couldn't stop wondering whether Tate actually wanted him, or whether he simply wanted the familiarity, comfort, and security that Noah represented after everything else in his life had fallen apart. After 22 years of silence, Noah wasn't prepared to assume the difference didn't matter. Noah could remember hundreds of moments when Tate could have stopped, looked at him, and realized that whatever existed between them was more complicated than friendship. Tate had known Noah for most of their lives. They had shared a home, routines, secrets, arguments, comfort, and years of ordinary life together. Noah had been there long before Riley. He had been there long before Mark. Tate had had decades to realize what Noah meant to him. Yet he didn't. Not then. Not when Noah was right beside him. Not when Noah was waiting for some indication that their connection mattered to Tate in the same way it mattered to him. Tate only seemed to discover the truth after Noah had begun forming meaningful relationships with other people, and especially after Riley and Mark became important parts of Noah's life. To Noah, that timing was far too convenient to ignore. He couldn't understand why Tate's feelings had supposedly appeared only when Noah was no longer guaranteed to remain available. Why now? Why after Riley? Why after Mark? Why after Noah had become engaged? Why did Tate suddenly seem desperate only after there was a genuine possibility that Noah might build a life without him? 2 days before the engagement announcement, Noah told Susie about his idea of proposing to Riley. By then, Noah had already made up his mind that he wanted to move forward with his life. He wasn't telling Susie because he expected Tate to react. As far as Noah was concerned, Tate had made his position clear for years. Then Riley agreed at the restaurant. The engagement suddenly made everything real. Noah was no longer simply talking about building a future with someone else. He was actually doing it. And somewhere along the way, Susie may have mentioned Noah's plans to Tate. If she did, Tate would have heard something that shook the comfortable assumptions he had carried for years. Noah wasn't going to remain available to him forever. Tate became jealous. Or perhaps more accurately, he became terrified of losing his ex-buddy. For the first time, Tate was confronted with the possibility that Noah could wake up one morning, marry someone else, build a life with them, and no longer need Tate at all. That fear may have caused Tate to misinterpret his own emotions. Instead of recognizing the feelings as panic, possessiveness, grief, or fear of abandonment, Tate convinced himself that they were romantic love. Suddenly, Noah was no longer simply the person who had always been there. He was someone Tate might actually lose. And that realization changed Tate's behavior almost overnight. Tate began pursuing Noah with an intensity Noah had never experienced from him before. The man Noah had known for decades as his emotionally guarded buddy seemed to disappear, replaced by someone desperate to hold on to him. But Noah couldn't understand it. He had spent years waiting for Tate to show him that kind of affection. Why now? Why only after Riley? Why only after the engagement became possible? To Noah, the timing made Tate's feelings look less like a long-hidden truth and more like a desperate reaction to losing his place in Noah's life. Tate may have believed he had finally discovered that he loved Noah. Noah wondered whether Tate had simply discovered that he couldn't stand the thought of Noah choosing someone else. And there was a devastating difference between those two things. Tate might have been trying to keep Noah emotionally hooked because he was terrified of losing him. Noah, however, had already spent 22 years being emotionally hooked to Tate. He wasn't prepared to spend another 22 wondering whether Tate's feelings were genuine or merely fear wearing the disguise of love. Noah had an answer, and it wasn't the answer Tate wanted. Tate was afraid of losing him. That was all. Or at least that was what Noah believed. Noah didn't interpret Tate's sudden intensity as proof of emotions that had been secretly developing for 20 years. He interpreted it as panic. Tate had spent so long assuming Noah would always be there that the possibility of losing him had finally shattered that assumption. That was why Tate seemed to become someone else entirely. The calm, emotionally guarded buddy Noah had known for years suddenly became frantic, possessive, emotional, and desperate to keep Noah close. Noah barely recognized him. And that frightened him more than it reassured him. For 22 years, Tate had never treated Noah as though he were a romantic or sexual possibility. Tate had never openly named what existed between them. He had never given Noah the certainty Noah needed. He had allowed their relationship to remain suspended in an undefined space where Noah could never quite determine what he meant to Tate. Then decades later, Tate suddenly wanted something different. Noah couldn't help thinking, "You had 22 years to figure this out." He didn't believe Tate had simply been secretly waiting all those years for the right moment to confess his love. From Noah's perspective, the explanation was much simpler and much more painful. Maybe Tate was bored. Maybe Tate was lost. Maybe Tate had finally realized how much attention he had taken from Noah without ever having to give Noah certainty in return. Maybe Tate wasn't discovering love at all. Maybe he was discovering what it felt like to lose someone who had always been there. Noah believed Tate needed therapy to understand that distinction. He didn't believe Noah's role was to soothe Tate through it or make the consequences disappear. For years, Noah had been the one expected to endure Tate's silence. Now Tate was experiencing uncertainty for himself. Noah wasn't going to rescue him from it. That was why Noah refused to give Tate his heart. He could remain close. He could listen. He could allow Tate to believe there was still something between them. He could even give Tate the emotional comfort he wanted in limited doses. But Noah would not surrender the one thing Tate had spent 22 years failing to ask for honestly. His trust. His complete emotional loyalty. His heart. Noah had learned too much about the cost of giving those things away. He also refused to let Tate rewrite history simply because Tate had finally changed his mind. The past still existed. Every year of silence still existed. Every unanswered question still existed. Every moment Noah had wondered whether he mattered still existed. And Chloe's marriage had made those wounds even deeper. Tate could not simply arrive years later, suddenly overwhelmed by feelings, and expect Noah to pretend the intervening decades had never happened. So Noah made a private decision. He would give Tate the idea of whatever Tate wanted without giving him the reality. If Tate wanted to believe that Noah's continued closeness meant reconciliation, Noah wouldn't necessarily correct him. If Tate wanted to believe their renewed intimacy was the beginning of a love affair, Noah could let him believe it. If Tate wanted to believe Noah had finally chosen him, Noah could allow Tate to live inside that interpretation. But Noah would know the difference. Tate could have the illusion. Noah would keep the truth. And the truth was that Noah's heart was no longer available simply because Tate had finally decided he wanted it. Tate had mistaken physical closeness for emotional forgiveness. He had mistaken Noah's willingness to remain near him for renewed trust. He had mistaken Noah's silence for acceptance. But Noah knew better. He wasn't giving Tate everything Tate wanted. He was giving Tate just enough to keep Tate believing there might be something more. Because after 22 years of being left in the dark, Noah had finally learned how powerful uncertainty could be. Tate had lived comfortably inside that uncertainty for decades. Now Noah was the one controlling how much truth Tate received. And if Tate thought their dalliance was a genuine love affair, Noah wasn't going to rush to correct him. Tate could call it love. Tate could believe it was a second chance. Tate could convince himself that Noah had finally returned his feelings. But if Noah had any say in the matter, Tate would never receive the reality behind the illusion. Because Noah's heart was the one thing Tate could no longer simply assume would always be waiting for him. He couldn't convince himself that Tate had suddenly discovered some profound love that had been waiting beneath the surface for 22 years. Instead, Noah believed Tate was bored, lonely, curious, or simply looking for something different. Their longtime platonic relationship had existed for so many years that crossing that boundary seemed to Noah like a forbidden temptation Tate had finally decided to indulge. In Noah's mind, Tate hadn't chosen him. Tate had chosen the taboo of changing a relationship that had remained safely undefined for 22 years. That distinction mattered enormously to Noah. He believed Tate wanted the excitement of something forbidden without understanding the emotional consequences for him. Once the novelty disappeared, Noah assumed Tate would eventually return to the life he had always chosen. So Noah endured Tate's affection without allowing himself to believe in it. He didn't interpret Tate's closeness as devotion, he interpreted it as temporary attention. He didn't see Tate finally choosing him, He saw Tate satisfying a curiosity he should have confronted decades earlier. And because Noah had spent so long believing Jay's version of Tate, that Tate would eventually become bored, choose someone else and leave him behind, he couldn't imagine that this time could be different. Tate believed they had finally crossed the boundary separating friendship from love. Noah believed Tate had simply crossed a boundary because he couldn't resist knowing what existed on the other side. To Noah, it wasn't a beginning. It was another temporary chapter in a relationship that had already taught him not to expect anything lasting from Tate. Tate remembered the arguments with Noah after Noah had discovered the truth. He couldn't forget the way Noah had challenged him, refusing to let Tate make decisions on his behalf or dictate what their relationship meant. Noah had imposed his own autonomy on Tate in a way Tate hadn't expected. He had made it unmistakably clear that Noah was capable of choosing for himself. Tate had hated hearing it at the time. Tate's voice was raw, trembling, full of frustration, every word sharp as he paced back and forth. "You think I don't notice, Noe?" he barked. "You think I don't see you sneaking into that room, the spare room, moving your stuff, acting like it's nothing, like you don't even care?" Noah didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't look up. Calm, steady, even though every fiber of him felt the tension Tate was throwing into the air. He kept his hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, the epitome of stillness in contrast to Tate's storm. "It's just the spare room," Noah said evenly, voice low, almost bored. "I need a place to sleep, that's all. I'm not trying to make you feel whatever this is." Tate stopped packing, took a step closer, and pointed at Noah as the gesture itself could slice through the air. "Just the spare room?" he hissed. "Just the spare room? Do you even hear yourself? You move your bed, your blankets, your pillows into that room and it feels like you're moving away from me, like I'm not enough." Noah tilted his head slightly, the smallest trace of irritation flickering in his eyes. "Tate," he said calmly, "it's literally a spare room. I'm not moving away from you, I'm not abandoning you, it's just sleep, that's it." Tate laughed bitterly, a short, jagged sound that vibrated with frustration. "Sleep, just sleep. You think I care about sleep? You think that's all it is?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a hiss, every syllable trembling with possessive intensity. "Every time you disappear into that room, it feels like I'm losing you. It feels like you're slipping out of my orbit, like I'm not the first person you think of anymore. And I can't handle that." Noah shifted slightly, finally meeting Tate's gaze, still calm, still neutral. "Tate," he said softly, carefully, "I'm not leaving. I'm not moving out of your orbit. I need space, that's all. I sleep better there, I think better there. I don't want you to feel like I'm abandoning you because I'm not." Tate's fists flexed at his sides, trembling. He pressed forward slightly, not touching, just leaning into the tension like a weight could pull Noah closer. "Space? You don't need space," he hissed. "You think you need space, but all I see is distance. I see you, moving away from me in the one place we've always been together. The hallway, the bed, the rooms we've shared, the nights we've stayed side by side. Now you're choosing a wall between us." Noah exhaled slowly, voice quiet, deliberate. "I'm not choosing a wall, I'm choosing a bed to sleep in, that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm still here, Tate. I'm still me, I'm still with you." Tate shook his head, stepping back, voice cracking with frustration. "No, that's not enough. It's never enough. I see you walking into that room and God, I feel like I'm losing my mind, like I'm not enough, like I'm nothing." Noah stayed still, absorbing Tate's words, calm, neutral, untouchable. He reached out a hand carefully, but Tate swatted it away, packing again, muttering curses, shouting obscenities under his breath. "Fuck this, fuck you," Tate finally shouted, voice echoing in the empty hallway, eyes blazing with raw, unfiltered frustration. I slammed the door at the top of the stairs, the loud bang echoing through the house. My chest heaved and hot tears stung my eyes. Noah didn't move, he just watched me from across the room, quiet, calm, unshaken, and that only made the fire in me burn hotter. I leaned against the door, breathing hard, mind racing. How could he say those things? How could he make me feel like nothing? Every instinct screamed to storm back, to demand he admit what he meant, to make him apologize, but I stayed frozen, trapped between fury and the ache of betrayal. Tate finally slammed the door behind him, the echo bouncing off the walls of his room like a physical thud against his chest. He didn't even glance at the neatly made bed he usually shared with the one person who had always been his anchor. Instead, he dropped onto the mattress, face pressed into the pillow, arms flung wide, and let the tension of the night unravel in a torrent of heat, frustration, and self-loathing. Every muscle in his body ached with the memory of the confrontation. Noah had been calm, untouchable, infuriatingly neutral, and had stood there in the hallway giving him nothing. Nothing to grab, nothing to argue against, and nothing to touch, just calm, untouchable, distant. And that calm had ignited something in Tate he couldn't put into words. Anger, jealousy, and a deep, gnawing fear that the bond they'd built over years, the friendship, shared bed, and the closeness he'd always taken for granted was slipping through his fingers. He pressed his face harder into the pillow, breathing ragged, trying to swallow the panic coiling in his chest. He could feel it like a physical weight, the thought that Noah had made the spare room his own for the night. A small act, mundane, innocent, but to Tate it was seismic. The idea that Noah could exist in that space, separate from him, unclaimed by his presence, felt like a knife to the heart. "Shit," Tate muttered, voice muffled into the pillow. "Shit, shit, shit." His hands clawed at the sheets, curling around the edge of the mattress as if he could tether Noah to him somehow, just by will alone. "No, no, it's over, it's all over. He's moving away from me, my bed, my room, my space, and I." His voice faltered, cracking into a whisper raw with disbelief and fear. He rolled onto his back, staring up at the ceiling, chest rising and falling too fast, eyes wide in the dim light. "He doesn't need me, he's fine, he doesn't care. He's leaving me behind." Tate's fists clenched again, tightening against the sheets until his knuckles ached. "He's gone." The thought hit him like a punch. Not just leaving the room, not just sleeping apart, it was the idea that Noah's calm, measured detachment had already started creating distance Tate didn't know how to bridge. Distance he had always avoided at all costs, and now he was powerless. The fear of losing Noah, of losing that unspoken, irreplaceable closeness, twisted tight in his chest like a vice. Tate curled back into a fetal position, hands gripping the pillow as if it could replace the one thing he had lost or was about to lose. Every rational thought in his head collided with the emotional chaos in his chest. He hated himself for letting it get this far. He hated Noah for standing there and staying calm, neutral, untouchable. And yet, he loved him more fiercely than he could bear. Tate buried his face in the pillow again, shaking slightly, breath uneven, eyes closed against the fear and the fire coursing through him. "He's gone, my buddy, my everything." His whisper broke into a ragged, inaudible moan. "He's gone, and I." He didn't move, he didn't even try. He just lay there, staring at the ceiling, heartbeat thundering, mind spiraling, fully aware that the night had changed everything. And somewhere deep inside, under the rage and jealousy, under the fear and heartbreak, a small, stubborn spark of hope flickered, hope that Noah might still return, that their bond wasn't entirely gone. But that spark felt fragile, nearly extinguished by the weight of Tate's own obsession, his anger, and the overwhelming realization that even one night apart could feel like a lifetime of loss. Tate pressed the pillow over his face, trying to smother the heat of panic, the ache of longing, the raw, uncontainable jealousy, and whispered to himself over and over. "He's mine, he's only mine, he's always going to be mine." Even as he knew it wasn't true, even as he knew Noah had already claimed a space, however small, outside of him in the spare room and in the world. And in that quiet, suffocating moment, Tate understood truly, completely, and painfully that he might have already lost Noah, even if the blonde didn't know it yet. Noah and I had fought in ways that we couldn't come back from, and today was no different. Noah had said hateful things to me, and I cried on my bed trying to understand how my sweet friend would sling insults at me while saying he loathed me. Then I heard the faint click of my door opening. My heart slammed against my ribs, skipping and pounding at the same time. "No, please not now," I thought, panic rising. I lifted my head slightly, wiping my eyes, and froze. Noah was standing there, quiet, his expression unreadable. "Hey," he said softly, almost too casual. I swallowed, unable to speak. My pulse raced, every nerve on fire. "Why now? Why come in here when I'm like this?" He stepped a little closer, but not too close, and I could feel my chest tighten even more. Every instinct screamed at me, run, hide, push him away, but another part of me just wanted him to stay, to not ever leave. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the air between us was charged, trembling with every thought and emotion I couldn't contain. I didn't move, I couldn't. I just watched him, heart hammering, desperate, jealous, and terrified all at once. I was still fuming when Noah stepped closer, sitting carefully on the edge of my bed. My fists were clenched in my lap, jaw tight, but my chest still throbbed with anticipation and hurt. "I didn't mean anything I said earlier," he began, voice low and sincere. "I'm sorry." I glared at him, heat still simmering in my chest. Then why did it feel like you didn't care? He sighed, running a hand over his face. Tate, Maya and I just slept that night next to you, that's all, it didn't mean anything else, I promise. My chest tightened and I could feel the tension in me start to melt. I love you, Tate, he admitted softly, eyes locking with mine, earnest and unguarded. The words hit me like a wave. My heart swelled so suddenly I thought it might burst, and before I could think I wrapped my arms around him. Noah hadn't said those words in months. I had almost convinced myself I would never hear those 3 words from him again. They had once come so naturally between us, woven into our conversations and quiet moments until I barely noticed how much they meant. Now, every time Noah remained silent, I felt the absence of them more deeply. I missed hearing him say them. More than I wanted to admit, I had been waiting for those 3 words to tell me that somewhere beneath the distance, I still mattered to him. Finally, I whispered into his shoulder, clutching him tightly. Finally, you say it. He hugged me back, careful but firm. I could feel him there, really there, and the anger, jealousy, and panic that had built up over the night slowly began to ebb. For the first time that evening, I let myself breathe. My Noah was here. My Noah cared, and for now, that was enough. My Noah still loved me, he just wouldn't say it so loosely like before his birthday. I'll forgive you, I said, voice low but firm, if you move back into my room. He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. Weekends only, he countered. Noah was being difficult. All 7 days, I said, staring at him without wavering. My chest ached, but I refused to back down. Noah held his ground and folded his arms near his chest. He breathed heavily, then nodded, taking me by surprise. He sighed, finally, the weight of resignation settling on him. Okay, he admitted softly. That night we slept together just like old times. His presence next to me calmed the storm in my chest, the jealousy and anger ebbing just slightly as I felt him there. I couldn't believe Noah had agreed to sleep next to me again, in my own bed. Not down the hall, not slipping away in the middle of the night to flee to that spare room that had vexed me for weeks. He was actually here beside me where he had been for so many years. But I was afraid to let myself feel relieved. Maybe Noah had only agreed to shut me up, not because he actually wanted to sleep beside me. Maybe he was tired of arguing with me. Maybe he was simply exhausted from having me break through his door at night, desperate to get him to come back. I couldn't stop wondering whether this was something Noah genuinely wanted or merely something he was tolerating, because he didn't know how else to deal with me. Still, I lay there beside him, afraid to move too much or say the wrong thing. After months of feeling Noah slipping away, having him beside me again felt almost too good to trust. Noah had always liked pleasing people, and maybe his sudden change of heart wasn't what I wanted it to be. Maybe he had simply decided to move on and let me believe I'd won, giving me what I wanted so I would finally stop fighting him about it. I woke at dawn and immediately realized Noah wasn't beside me. Of course there was a catch. For one brief moment, I had believed he had genuinely chosen to sleep next to me again. Instead, he had apparently slipped out before I woke, leaving the bed cold and empty. Noah had agreed to sleep beside me, but he had still found a way to leave before I could wake up and see him there. It vexed me more than I wanted to admit. Even when Noah gave me what I wanted, he somehow managed to make me feel as though I had lost. The faint roar of a car engine outside made my heart lurch. I peeked out the window and froze. Noah was running from the porch to a bright red convertible. It must be Mark, I spat under my breath. Who the hell had plans before 7 in the morning? My stomach twisted, anger bubbling hot. Mark drove off, taking Noah with him. I felt the familiar spike of rage and panic in my chest. I hate him for this. I hate that my Noah is gone. Every morning before dawn, Noah would consistently leave our bed, and by the time I woke around 8, his side was always as cold as an iceberg. I convinced myself he was doing it on purpose. Noah had finally given in and agreed to sleep beside me again, but leaving before I woke felt like a punch to the gut. Maybe this was Noah's way of maintaining his autonomy and boundaries. Maybe he wanted me to understand that agreeing to sleep beside me didn't mean surrendering every part of his life to me. He could give me the nighttime companionship I desperately wanted while still making it clear that I wasn't the center of his world anymore. I hated that realization. For years, I had been accustomed to Noah being there whenever I needed him. Now, even when he was beside me, he was reminding me that he could choose when to leave. I sank back against the bed, fists clenched. My day had started calmly, almost peacefully, and now it was chaos. Mark had taken my buddy away and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. They were going on long drives somewhere and I had a very good idea of the things Mark had planned and what long drives with men usually meant. Going forward, I began sleeping on top of Noah so the blonde tease couldn't slip out of our bed before dawn. I told myself it was the only way to keep him from disappearing while I slept. It worked about half the time, but it came with a price. Noah woke up mad, uncomfortable, and increasingly testy with me in the mornings. I knew my sleeping preference annoyed him, but the relief of waking up and finding him still there outweighed his irritation. On the days my plan didn't work, waking up and discovering Noah was gone enraged me to no end. Everyone in Los Angeles seemed to want my company and attention. Girls would compete for the privilege of being close to me, yet Noah acted as though sleeping beside me was a duty, a chore he had reluctantly agreed to perform. That bruised my ego more than I cared to admit. Night after night, I couldn't understand how the person who had once loved being beside me could now behave as though my presence was something he had to endure. Was I repulsive to him? Was asking Noah to sleep beside me really so unreasonable that he hated doing it? Those questions gnawed at me long after I woke. I could understand strangers rejecting me. I couldn't understand Noah doing it. My shorts were wet again. Damn it, I screamed in my head, feeling the heat of embarrassment and frustration roll through me. For some reason, every time I woke up in bed, my clothes were soaked in my bodily fluids. I hoped Noah never noticed when he left my bed every morning. Lunch came, but Noah didn't. I picked at my food, eyes flicking toward the door every few seconds, chest tight with worry and jealousy. Around 1:30 p.m., the sound of a car pulling up made my stomach drop. I peeked through the window and saw Mark opening the door for Noah. My pulse jumped, anger and panic rising in equal measure. I watched as they hugged, casual and familiar. Why is he like this? Why does he make everything about everyone else but me? My hands clenched into fists, nails biting into my palms. I saw that red jacket of Mark's on Noah's shoulders while that interloper said goodbye to Noah on the driveway. Noah smiled as he stepped inside the house. That smile Noah always gave to me was now meant for Mark. It felt like a punch to the gut. Noah looked around the room, eyes landing on me for just a moment, and I could see the calm, almost innocent way he moved, unaware of the storm I was feeling. Noah was smiling, really smiling, like he had won the best prize in the world. Noah proudly wore Mark's red coat, showing off his feelings for an older man I hated. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but jealousy and anger coiled tight in my chest. Mark had no right to be here, and Noah, my Noah, should have only needed me. I crossed my arms, chest tight, glaring at him. "You had plans," I snapped. He shrugged, trying to look calm. "I told you I just..." "This early?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You woke me up, you left me alone while you ran off." Noah shrugged. My stomach twisted with anger. "You're a coward, Noah. Couldn't you even tell me you didn't like me anymore? You just disappeared." "And what about Mark?" I asked, unable to keep the jealousy out of my tone. "Why is he involved? Why are you letting him?" Noah laughed lightly, almost mockingly, and it sent a fresh surge of rage through me. "Do you always have to make everything a crisis?" he asked, shaking his head. "Not everything is a crisis, Tate." "You would say that," I hissed. "Drop it, Tate," he demanded, voice firm, trying to shut me down. But I couldn't. I repeated my question, voice low but sharp, eyes locked on his. "I love you," he said finally, soft but certain, as if the words alone could smooth over the storm inside me. I opened my mouth to respond, chest still tight, when the phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the room, sharp and threatening. My heart jumped, panic and anger colliding. Noah's gaze flicked to the phone, tension creeping into his posture. That ring, it felt like it could undo everything we just said. I clenched my fists, trying to steady myself. Not now, I thought, not while I'm this close to him. The air between us vibrated with unspoken words, jealousy and fear. Every second felt like a countdown, and I couldn't stop thinking, whatever that phone call brought, it could ruin us. I snatched the phone and pressed it to my ear, heart hammering. "Hello," I barked. It was the perv Mark calling from his car phone. I could hear him smirking through the line, and rage flared inside me. "Call again later," I snapped, my voice sharp and biting. I slammed the receiver down, shaking with anger. Noah watched me calm, almost amused. Noah tried to make me jealous. Maya's hot, he said, voice casual, and Mark's a friend. My chest tightened. You left my bed early to go be with him. That was deliberate, wasn't it, to hurt me? No, he said lightly shrugging, that's petty, childish. I felt my blood boil. Petty, childish, you think leaving me alone in my own bed isn't childish? Look, Noah said, softening, stepping closer, I had somewhere I needed to be. That better be the truth, I huffed. No one leaves Tate alone in bed. Get in bed where you belong. Noah looked hesitantly at my mattress. Just for tonight, he added almost reluctantly, and my chest tightened again. Just for tonight, that phrase stung more than anything else. My anger surged. How could he put limits on this even for a second? But exhaustion weighed me down. My head throbbed, my chest still buzzing from the earlier fight, and my eyes burned with unshed tears. I climbed into bed anyway, slumping against the covers, and let the silence stretch between us. The anger didn't vanish, it simmered, but for now, sleep claimed me. We lay side by side, the quiet hum of the night around us. My fingers traced absent patterns on the sheet as I tried to steady my racing thoughts. I got my Princeton acceptance letter, I whispered, turning my head just enough to watch his reaction. Congratulations, Noah said, his voice soft but warm. His eyes lit up with genuine happiness, and for a moment the tension from earlier melted away. I nudged him lightly. I'm really excited, but what about you? What are your plans for college? He hesitated, shifting so he faced me. Community college, that's all I can afford right now, he admitted quietly, a small shadow crossing his face. I felt a pang in my chest. Noah, we'll figure something out. I'll talk to Mom and see what we can do to help. I want you to have choices too, I offered, squeezing his hand gently. His eyes softened and a small, genuine smile tugged at his lips. You really think you can pull some strings for me? He teased, but his tone carried warmth and relief. I'll try, I said with a grin. You deserve it, Noah. Noah laughed softly, the sound light and happy, and leaned his head on my shoulder. I'm happy for you, Tate, really, you worked so hard, and now you're going to Princeton. I'm proud of you. His words eased the lingering tension. Thanks, Noah, I said quietly, it means a lot. He pressed a quick kiss to the top of my head. Always, he whispered, always happy for you. We stayed like that for a while, side by side, letting the night stretch around us. For the first time in hours, maybe even days, it felt like everything was okay. I'd help Noah with college, especially after everything he'd done for me. It was my turn to return the favor. He'd pulled me through so much, now I could help secure his future. Looking at him now, lying beside me, smiling softly, I felt the weight of those years press gently on my chest, not heavy but grounding. I owed him this, owed him more than I could ever repay. Noah, I whispered, turning slightly to meet his eyes, we'll make sure you get what you need. College, your future. I've got you. He blinked, surprise and warmth in his gaze. You really mean that? Of course, I said, squeezing his hand. After everything you've done for me, it's the least I can do. He smiled, the kind of small, genuine smile that made all the stress, the fights, and the jealousy fade for just a moment. Thanks, Tate, that really means a lot. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, I realized that after 14 years, after everything, we still had each other. And maybe that was enough to face whatever came next. I stayed in the room a little longer, trying to calm the storm in my chest, but every small thing he did set my nerves on fire. He glanced at a brochure again, flipping through pages and smiling at something the college had listed. I could feel my chest tighten, smiling at a page, really, not at me. Even if I had to ask Terrence for help about college tuition or a recommendation letter for the blonde, I'd do it if it helped Noah. The landline rang, shrill and loud, echoing through the quiet house. He flinched slightly before getting up to answer. I watched him move, stomach twisting. Why does everyone get to make him smile like that? He spoke softly into the receiver, nodding and chuckling at something I couldn't hear. My jaw tightened. He's laughing with someone else, without me noticing him. Even when he finally hung up and turned back to me, eyes warm and soft, I couldn't shake the jealousy bubbling inside my gut. Every little smile, every blink, Every movement reminded me that he had a world outside of me, and that pit in my stomach screamed that I might not matter enough. "Hey," he said softly, touching my shoulder, "you're quiet, thinking too much." I forced a laugh, heart pounding. "Maybe," I muttered, "just worried about college stuff, your plans." I stared at him, trying to steady my voice. "I saw you at the cinema, you went without me." He shifted uncomfortably, glancing away. "I needed some space, some personal time," he said quietly, and my chest dropped as if someone had punched me. "Space?" I hissed, my hands trembling. You love Lucas too, don't you? You went to see the film without me." He nodded slowly. "I like it. It's a good film, but it doesn't mean I care about you any less, Tate. I just needed a break from everything." My stomach twisted, jealousy and hurt clawing through me. He's pulling away for films, people, for adult expectations, just like Maggie pulled away from the protagonist in Lucas. "Not everyone likes Corey Haim," Noah said. "I wanted to watch his new film by myself." "Who the fuck doesn't love Corey Haim?" I muttered, voice cracking. "It's a good movie, and I get it, I do, but it still hurts that you went alone." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back slightly, panic and possessiveness making me cling to my anger. I don't want to lose you to anything, to films, friends, or to life," I admitted, voice raw. "I'm not going anywhere, Tate," he said softly, trying to meet my eyes. "I'm still yours, sometimes I need time to breathe too." I bit my lip, struggling to calm the storm inside me. My jealousy burned, my fear of abandonment gnawed at me, but even as I stood my ground, I knew he was telling the truth, even if it didn't make the hurt any smaller. "I want details," I said too quickly, "about the girls you're with." I swallowed. "I want to know what you're up to, what makes you happy, Noah." He looked at me for a long moment, then unexpectedly smirked. "Not cruel, not kind, just certain." "That's the thing," he said. "You don't actually want details, you just want to be okay with it, and I'm done pretending those are the same." My stomach dropped. "I'm not saying this to hurt you." He continued, calmer now, almost rehearsed. "But if we're going to stay in each other's lives, there are things that are non-negotiable." I laughed once, sharp and brittle. "You've got a list now." "Yes," he said, "because I need one." He held up a finger. "First, no spying on me, on my friends, on my calls, my messages, none of it. If I didn't tell you, it's not yours to know." My jaw tightened, but he didn't pause. "Second, if I'm sleeping alone, you don't come into my room, not to check on me, not because you can't sleep, not because you're anxious." "That's cruel," I snapped. "No," he said evenly. "What was cruel was waking up to someone who wouldn't listen when I said no. That one hit." "Third," he went on, voice steady, "you don't go digging, no looking for information, no cornering people, no trying to catch me in something. I'm allowed to have parts of my life that aren't yours." My hands clenched into fists. "So you get secrets." "I get privacy," he corrected. "Fourth, you don't push my friends away, no insults, no jealousy disguised as jokes, no making them feel unwelcome so you can feel secure." I scoffed. "They don't even like me." "That's not an excuse," he said, "and it's not my problem to make you feel okay about it." "Fifth," he continued, holding up another finger, "stay on your side of the bed if I ask, that's it, simple." "Sixth, don't ask for emotional declarations," he said, eyes locked on mine. "I won't give them on demand, and I won't pretend to feel things just to satisfy your fears." I swallowed hard, chest tight. Every word, every line hit me like a knife. And yet, even as I seethed with jealousy, I knew these rules weren't cruelty, they were him trying to keep us from breaking. "I won't say the words you want," Noah said quietly, "because no matter what I say, you're never satisfied, you keep needing more." That hit harder than shouting. "Then don't hurt me," I said, voice raw. "Don't hurt me either, Tate," I added, surprising myself with the honesty. "Deal?" he asked, holding my gaze. "Deal," I whispered, relief and fear twisting together in my chest. I swallowed and said it anyway, because if I didn't, it would rot in my chest. "Fine," I said, "you've got rules, I get to say what I want too." He didn't interrupt, that alone felt dangerous. "These are mine." I held up a finger, mirroring him even though my hand was shaking. First, don't use words to intentionally hurt me, not when you're angry, not when you're trying to win. If you're done, say you're done, don't carve me up first. His jaw tightened, he nodded once. Second, I said, if you ever want to quit our relationship, actually quit, tell me, don't fade out, don't replace me quietly and pretend nothing changed. I can do that, he said softer. Third, no lies, I continued, not the kind that protects feelings, not the kind that lets things rot. If you're seeing someone, say it. If you're pulling away, say it. I hesitated, then forced myself to keep going. Fourth, I said, voice dropping, I need your body in my bed to sleep. He inhaled sharply, but I rushed on before he could stop me. I'm not saying sex, I'm not saying ownership, I'm saying I don't sleep, I spiral, I panic, I need the weight, the warmth, that's the truth. I can't fall asleep if your body is absent, I have to sleep next to you, so don't make me come find you in the dark. Silence stretched. Fifth, I added, quieter now, let me touch you, a hand, a shoulder, a foot, something that reminds me you're real and you're still here. He looked at me, then really looked, and something conflicted crossed his face. And sixth, I finished, anger bleeding through the fear, don't flirt or intentionally make me jealous, don't use other people as proof you're desirable while I'm drowning right in front of you. Lastly, no one, not even girls, comes between us and how we sleep or live together. The room felt too small. Noah didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was steady but not unkind. Some of that, he said carefully, I can try to meet halfway. My heart jumped. But some of it, he continued, can't be automatic. Touch has to be okay in the moment. Sleeping together has to be mutual, and I won't promise to manage your jealousy for you. If I want to sleep alone or leave before you wake, that's my right. I flinched. That doesn't mean I don't care, he added. It means I won't disappear into you so you don't have to feel scared. The words hurt, but they weren't cruel. And Tate, he said quietly, if we're going to keep doing this, it has to be because we choose each other, not because one of us can't breathe without the other. That one lodged deep. I need to spread my wings a bit, Noah admitted, running a hand through his hair. I like having multiple friends, people to talk to laugh with. I frowned slightly, chest tightening, and me. You're my special person, Tate, he said quickly, eyes locking with mine. But I can't be everything for you, you need your own world too. I swallowed. My world. You need to get out there, he urged gently. Meet people, see what's out there, don't let me be the only one keeping you grounded. I hesitated, glancing down at my hands. Okay, I said finally in a small and uncertain voice. I'll try, there are many ways at school to socialize. He smiled, soft and patient, like he'd been expecting my resistance. Good, that's all I'm asking, explore a little, be around people who aren't me for a bit, it won't change us, Tate, I promise. I nodded, but a pang of jealousy lingered in my chest. Even while encouraging me, he's still out there, with others, am I supposed to be okay with that? Noah noticed the flicker in my expression and reached over, brushing a hand lightly over mine. You're still my person, he said quietly, always. I let the words sink in, trying to quiet the jealousy that coiled tight in my stomach. It wasn't easy, but maybe he was right. Maybe I did need to see the world outside him. There's one more thing, Noah added, his tone steady but serious now. He didn't look at me at first, his eyes stayed fixed on the carpet like he needed the ground beneath him to say it. I don't want you punishing me or acting out to make a point about something I've done or how you think I've slighted you. My chest tightened. No silent treatments, no pushing buttons, no doing things just to hurt me back, he continued. If I mess up, tell me, if you're angry, say it, but don't turn it into a test I don't know I'm taking. I nodded, slow and deliberate, even though part of me bristled. Okay, I said, I hear you. He finally looked at me then, searching my face. I mean it, Tate, I don't want us keeping score. I said okay, I repeated, quieter this time, my fingers curled into my sleeve. I don't mean to punish you, I thought, I just don't know what to do with the hurt when it shows up. Noah exhaled, some tension leaving his shoulders. Good. I nodded again, forcing myself to hold his gaze. Agreeing was easier than admitting how instinctive my reactions had become, how fear always came first, how losing him felt like something I had to fight with whatever weapons I had left. Tate's love for Noah was absolute. It extended so deeply into the fabric of Tate and Noah's relationship, and lives that the extent of it was unable to be understood in any clean or ordinary way, because it wasn't something that sat on top of Tate's life like an emotion. It was embedded in it, threaded through every decision, every silence, every absence of explanation, every moment where he should have been able to detach but simply couldn't. Tate was the only person in Lowe's Angels who truly knew the extent of Tate's love, even if no one else would ever recognize it in the form it actually took, because what others saw as inconsistency or emotional limitation was, inside Tate, actually the opposite: an overconcentration, an overfixation, a total narrowing of emotional direction that refused to disperse itself evenly across anything else in his life. Tate's arrested development was the direct result of his love for Noah for years, not in the simplistic sense of blame or causation, but in the way a single gravitational pull can distort everything that orbits around it, bending growth, delaying separation, warping what becoming an adult was supposed to look like, when every internal milestone kept getting silently rerouted back to one constant presence in his mind. His mother had taken him to doctors, trying to find out why his maturity and neurological existence existed at the age of 15 in ways that didn't align with how the rest of his body and environment functioned, why he could be socially fluent in some spaces yet emotionally stalled in others, why independence never fully solidified into detachment the way it was supposed to, why he could perform adulthood externally while internally remaining anchored in a singular attachment that never loosened. They ran assessments, asked questions, tried to label patterns that didn't quite fit clean diagnostic edges, and Tate sat through all of it with the same quiet refusal to translate the truth of what was actually happening inside him, because there was no clinical explanation he was willing to offer that involved Noah at all. Tate would never tell her why Noah believed that Tate didn't love him, because that truth sat in a place that Tate had locked away even from himself in language, and because admitting it out loud would have required him to break the illusion of simplicity that had allowed him to function in public spaces without exposing the full, consuming weight of what Noah actually meant to him. That was because Tate refused to admit how much he loved Noah, not in the sense of denial of feeling, but in the sense of refusing to externalize it in a world that would inevitably misinterpret it, flatten it, or reduce it into something transactional or performative, when in reality it had never been either. It had been constant, structural, and quietly total in a way that made expression feel almost inadequate compared to the intensity of the thing itself. Because inside Tate, love for Noah was not a fluctuating state. It was a baseline condition, a permanent orientation of attention, a silent architecture beneath his behavior that dictated proximity, priority, and persistence even when he could not articulate any of it in socially legible terms. And because he never translated it into the kind of explicit reassurance Noah could recognize, because he assumed its existence would be obvious in the way he stayed, the way he returned, the way he never truly detached even when he should have, Noah was left to interpret the silence through his own experience of ambiguity, and that ambiguity slowly became uncertainty, and that uncertainty eventually became fear. Which meant the tragedy of them was not that Tate didn't love Noah enough, but that Tate's love was so absolute, structurally consuming, and internally obvious to him that he never realized it was invisible in the exact places where Noah needed to see it spoken aloud, defined, and made safe. And so, what remained between them was not a lack of love, but a catastrophic mismatch in how love was recognized, communicated, and understood across two people living inside the same relationship but experiencing entirely different emotional physics. The problem for Tate wasn't that he loved Noah. It had never been. If anything, that was the only part of his life that had ever been completely certain, completely stable, completely unshakable, no matter what shifted around him. The problem was that it was impossible for Tate to explain how much he loved Noah to Noah without exposing the parts of himself he had never told another human being, the parts he didn't even have language for outside of internal experience. Because the truth of Tate's emotional reality was not simple affection. It was structural. It was physiological. It was the way his body responded to separation with instability he could not fully regulate, the way his mind locked into patterns of fixation that didn't resolve through time or distance in the way other people described love fading or softening. And layered underneath that, even more hidden, were the things he had never allowed himself to speak aloud in any honest form. The seizures. The inability to regulate his body temperature under stress. The nightmares that didn't come and go like ordinary dreams, but returned with consistency when emotional separation from Noah became prolonged. The arrested development that had followed him through adulthood like a shadow doctors couldn't fully explain, and his mother couldn't fully accept, even after years of evaluations that circled around everything except the one variable he refused to name. Noah. Tate had been a victim of two violent gay hate crimes. The motive for the hate crimes had been sexual jealousy and romantic partner violence that escalated due to misunderstandings concerning his platonic, undefined relationship with Noah. Jay, his ex-fiancée, had misinterpreted the strong feelings of love between the two boys as a threat to an established, long-term gay sexual relationship that Noah's consistent presence threatened. The effects of the hidden violence on his 15th birthday from the shower attack were irreparable physical, emotional, and neurological damage that impacted Tate's life. It appeared in ways he never fully disclosed to anyone, because every time he tried to explain the context of why he had been targeted, it circled back to the same impossible center. His attachment, his visibility, his secrets, and the way other people interpreted the intensity of what he felt for Noah as something they could categorize, punish, or distort. Noah had spent years hiding his sexuality from Tate, not because he was ashamed of being gay, but because he was terrified of what the truth might cost him. Tate was his closest buddy, the person whose presence had become woven into nearly every part of his life. Yet Noah knew Tate well enough to fear two possibilities: that Tate might physically retaliate in anger, or that he might emotionally withdraw and leave their relationship permanently changed. The thought of either possibility frightened Noah. He could endure keeping a painful secret more easily than he could endure losing Tate. So, Noah became careful. He avoided conversations that might reveal too much, deflected questions about girls, and kept his private feelings locked away. Whenever Tate came close to discovering the truth, Noah instinctively pulled back. It wasn't that Noah didn't trust Tate. It was that he valued their bond so much that he was terrified of what might happen if Tate knew everything. For Noah, hiding his sexuality became a form of self-preservation, and, paradoxically, an attempt to preserve the relationship he valued most. Noah was under the impression that Tate did not understand what it was like to be terrified of someone you love, not just because you're afraid of how they would react to new variables, but what if you knew that the person you were supposed to love, Jay, for instance, could naturally use threats, violence, and terror to control his every movement? Tate's entire childhood had been based on how his father would control his movements. Noah never understood why Tate obeyed Terrence without question. From Noah's perspective, Tate seemed to accept every rule, every demand, and every restriction his father imposed without fighting back. Noah couldn't understand why Tate didn't find a way to resist while he was still living at home. What Noah didn't know was that Tate wasn't simply being obedient, he was terrified. Tate feared that if he openly defied Terrence, his father might retaliate against Noah or even kill him. That possibility haunted Tate constantly. He also feared that Terrence could take away his access to Noah entirely, separating them and making it impossible for Tate to see or protect his buddy. So Tate stayed quiet. He followed Terrence's orders, even when doing so made him miserable, because he believed obedience was the only way to keep Noah safe and remain in his life. To Noah, Tate's compliance looked like weakness or indifference. To Tate, it was a desperate sacrifice. He wasn't obeying because he didn't care about Noah. He was obeying because he cared about him enough to be terrified of what rebellion might cost them both. In 1986, Tate finally managed to convince Terrence to let him attend Brown University. The decision came only after their relationship reached a breaking point. When Tate dared to challenge his father's authority and question the choices Terrence had made for his son's life, Terrence responded violently, shooting Tate in the leg with a BB gun. The attack left Tate frightened, but also more determined than ever to find a way out of his father's control. Tate discovered something that gave him leverage. He knew about Terrence's secret photo room, a disturbing collection containing thousands of illegal images of Tate from his childhood. Tate threatened to tell Jay everything. Terrence immediately understood the danger. If Jay ever discovered what Terrence had done, the consequences could be devastating. Tate knew that Jay would kill Terrence if he learned the truth, and Terrence knew his son was no longer bluffing. Terrence had no doubt that Jay's vengeance and justice would be swift and violent. Jay loved Tate with a passion. No threat, predator, or abusive father would stand between Jay and Tate's safety and happiness. Jay had no loyalty to the family except for the blue air and Tate's blonde buddy. For once Terrence backed down. He was terrified of Jay, he always had been. Jay might have been 15 years younger than Terrence, but age had never made him someone Terrence could dismiss. Tate's fiancée had grown up wealthy, possessed enormous resources, and had learned how to kill during his years traveling abroad as a young man. By the time Tate was old enough to understand the complicated relationship between the two men, Jay had already killed more than 100 men. Jay's talents were guns and targets. He was the man who had taught Tate to shoot. This guy could shoot a mosquito off Tate's ear at 500,000 feet. Jay was also a billionaire with wealth and connections that placed him on nearly equal footing with Terrence. Terrence could intimidate most people through money, influence, and sheer force of personality, but Jay was one of the few people he could not simply overpower. Jay had already demonstrated that power where Tate was concerned. He had prevented Terrence from marrying Tate off in his early 20s without Jay's permission and, equally importantly, without Tate's willingness to comply. Terrence might have controlled much of Tate's life, but Jay had made it clear that there were limits to what he would allow. Now Tate had discovered something that could destroy Terrence entirely. The photo room. Tate knew what Terrence had hidden there and understood exactly how dangerous it would be if Jay ever learned the truth. Tate didn't need to threaten his father with violence, he only had to tell Jay. Terrence knew what would happen if that secret reached him. So for once Terrence surrendered. He allowed Tate to attend Brown not because he suddenly respected his son's independence or accepted his right to make his own choices, but because Tate had finally found something powerful enough to make his father afraid. For Tate, Brown represented far more than an education. It was his opportunity to get beyond Terrence's reach, establish some independence, and begin building a life that belonged to him rather than to his father. It was the first real door to freedom Tate had ever been given, and he intended to walk through it. Jay first approached Terrence in the fall of 1967 while Talia was pregnant. Jay was nearly 10 years old at the time, but he already possessed an unusual confidence and an understanding of the power surrounding his family. He wanted an arrangement with Terrence. When Terrence's child reached 18, Jay intended to marry the family's female heir. Terrence agreed, partly because he understood what Jay was capable of and knew better than to dismiss the boy's determination. But when Talia gave birth, the child was a boy. Tate. According to the original arrangement, the engagement should have been over immediately. There was no female heir to marry. Jay, however, didn't treat Tate as a disappointment or a replacement for the child he had expected. He liked the boy almost immediately. Tate's gender didn't matter to him. Instead of walking away, Jay became increasingly protective of him. He insisted on having financial and legal guardianship provisions established for Tate, ensuring that if anything happened to Tate's parents, the boy would have someone powerful enough to protect him and provide for him until he reached 18. Jay became Tate's godfather and took that responsibility seriously. To Jay, Tate wasn't valuable because of the family name, his inheritance, or the possibility of a future marriage. He was simply Tate, the child Jay had grown attached to and had decided he would protect. The original engagement might have disappeared the moment Tate was born, but Jay's commitment to the boy did not. Tate's gender had changed the agreement. It had never changed Jay's affection for his godson. Tate already had one godfather, Linus, whom Jay knew was not a good man. Talia, however, was fond of Linus, and Jay understood that challenging her choice directly would only create another conflict. Instead, he persuaded Terrence to make him Tate's second godfather. Jay wanted a permanent place in Tate's life. He imagined that once Tate was legally an adult they might eventually marry, but Jay also understood that Tate would have to want that future himself. He would not force Tate into a marriage he didn't desire. Fortunately for Jay, Tate grew deeply attached to him. From 1970 through 1986, Jay repeatedly protected Tate from Terrence's control. He intervened when Terrence became overbearing, used his influence to limit what Terrence could do to his son, and made Tate feel that there was at least one powerful adult willing to stand between him and his father's authority. Tate eventually promised Jay that he would come live with him when he turned 15. But in 1983, Tate changed his mind. Jay took the rejection badly. The disappointment turned into anger and the confrontation culminated in the shower attack, permanently altering the trust Tate had once placed in his godfather. For years, Jay had believed that his protection had earned him a special place in Tate's life. He had become accustomed to being the person Tate turned to whenever Terrence frightened or controlled him. What Jay could not tolerate was the possibility that someone else might become more important to Tate than he was. That became especially pronounced when Noah entered Tate's life. Jay watched as Tate's bond with Noah deepened and realized that Noah was developing an influence over Tate that Jay could no longer control. The jealousy was profound. Noah wasn't merely another person Tate cared about, he was gradually becoming someone Tate chose over Jay. That was when Jay's protectiveness began to reveal its darker side. His anger was no longer simply about losing Tate's trust, it was about losing his place in Tate's life. And Noah had become the person standing between Jay and the influence he believed he had spent years earning. Jay's anger went deeper than simple jealousy. He knew how Tate truly felt about Noah. There was no doubt in Jay's mind that Tate was in love with the boy he had once told Tate to bring home from kindergarten. What had begun as an innocent childhood friendship had developed into something Jay could no longer dismiss or control. Jay's borderline personality disorder intensified his fear of abandonment and made his attachment to Tate increasingly possessive. After their engagement and relationship ended in 1981, Jay couldn't accept that Tate had chosen to move on. He tried to convince Tate to return to him, but Tate refused. Eventually, Jay changed his strategy. If he couldn't persuade Tate to come back willingly, perhaps he could make Noah's presence unbearable. Jay began considering ways to get closer to Noah while simultaneously reminding Tate of the relationship they had lost. If Jay could establish his own relationship with the blonde and deliberately put it in front of Tate every day, perhaps Tate would become jealous. Perhaps watching Jay with Noah would remind Tate of what they had once shared and make him reconsider. Jay knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't pursuing Noah because he had suddenly fallen in love with him. Noah was becoming a means to an end, a way to provoke Tate, destabilize his attachment to Noah, and pull him back toward Jay. In Jay's mind, the plan was simple. If Tate saw Noah becoming part of Jay's world, perhaps Tate would finally understand what he was losing. But Jay fundamentally misunderstood Tate. The more he tried to wedge himself between Tate and Noah, the more clearly Tate saw the difference between love and possession. Jay wanted Tate to return because he couldn't bear losing his place in Tate's life. Tate wanted Noah because he genuinely chose him. That distinction was becoming impossible for Jay to ignore. Jay was brilliant at deception. He allowed Noah to believe that Tate was afraid Jay was trying to steal Noah away from him. It was an explanation that seemed to make sense, especially given Jay's growing attention toward Noah and Tate's increasingly anxious reactions. But the truth was almost exactly the opposite. As the ghost had warned Noah in his dreams, Jay wasn't trying to steal Noah away from Tate. Jay was trying to steal Tate away from Noah. Jay understood that Noah was the person who now held Tate's heart. If Jay wanted Tate back, he couldn't simply demand it. He had to create jealousy, uncertainty, and competition. Noah became the perfect instrument. Jay began turning the emotional connection he had carefully cultivated with Noah into a weapon. He encouraged Noah to trust him, allowed the young man to believe that Jay's attention was genuine, and positioned himself increasingly close to Noah, all while watching Tate's reactions. Every jealous glance from Tate encouraged him. Every moment Tate became upset by Jay, and Noah's growing closeness convinced Jay that his plan was working. Jay believed Tate would eventually do anything to keep him away from Noah, even return to the relationship they had ended years earlier. In Jay's mind, the equation was simple: make Tate believe that Noah was slipping away and Tate would come running back. What Jay failed to understand was that Tate's jealousy wasn't proof that he wanted Jay back. It was proof that Tate loved Noah and was terrified of losing him. And poor Noah had no idea what was really happening. He believed he was standing in the middle of a struggle over his own relationship with Tate. He couldn't see that he wasn't actually the prize Jay was fighting to possess. He was the bait. The real battle was taking place behind Noah's back, in plain sight, while Jay quietly manipulated both men and waited for Tate to make the choice Jay had been trying to force upon him for years. Jay failed to accomplish what he had wanted by Tate's 15th birthday. Despite all his efforts, Tate had not agreed to restart their relationship, and Jay's frustration only grew. What bothered Jay almost as much as Tate's refusal was the way Tate had begun avoiding him. Whenever Jay tried to force a private conversation or issue one of his ultimatums, Tate found a way to keep Noah nearby.